all about selling, something we all have to do every day. And it's, in my opinion, part art and part science. And Chip Reichhard is here with us today, and he's going to present in just a moment. But before Chip gets going, I really just wanted to tell you my story and why I am such a believer in Sandler. When the economy tanked in 2008, my close ratio went from very, very high. I probably have an 80, 90, 95% close ratio when someone's qualified. I couldn't sell a thing. No one was making a decision. And I had had a very good year. And my husband and I were kind of talking about what we might do with all that fun money that we had. And then the economy tanked. And I was so glad that I'd had a good year because it created a reserve. And I decided I can do nothing about the economy. I cannot do anything about making the phone ring more. But what I could do is improve my skills. So I enrolled in Sandler training. And I spent a year attending weekly training at Sandler Sales. And I have to honestly say that it was a very transformative process for me. And I say this to you all the time, Chip. I remember the time when nothing seemed to work for me. What I used to do no longer worked. The new way no longer worked, and I was like a fish out of water. But I hung in there, and I came up with a new selling system, and that's what Chip is going to talk to you today about. So Kelly is going to monitor the chat window. So Kelly, tell everybody how that will work this morning.
So if you have at the bottom or, your chat window, just type in your questions there, and, while Chip is presenting, and I will let him know that the question has been asked, and we'll try to make it as interactive as possible so that you guys can follow along in real time and get answers in real time. So just type your questions into the Zoom webinar chat, and I will bring them up to Chip.
Great. And if you forget something, we will allow for time at the end of Chip's session for additional Q&A. So with that, may I present the fabulous Chip Reichhard. Yay!
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Hope everyone had a great long weekend with Thanksgiving. And you get to start with some sales training day one. Not bad. Today, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about what I call a contrarian approach to sales, which is really a different topic name for what I teach all the time, which is really the Sandler selling system. But I'm going to take you through it to hopefully create some awareness about some things that possibly may be creating obstacles for you on the sales side and ways to get around that and maybe have it help you improve on the sales side. So with that, contrarian. So what do we mean by contrarian? Contrarian is opposing or going against current practice, opposite, different from others. So the Sandler system, I've been doing the Sandler training and coaching for 15 years now, and it is much different than everything I had done in the first 20 years of my sales career. And so I like starting with this because some of the concepts that I'm going to share with you may be different than your current practice, but they are different for a reason. They are different on purpose, and it is all based and founded in human psychology. So it isn't some kind of crazy thing to be different, for no reason, but it's all on purpose. So hopefully that makes sense for you. What I want to do is talk a little bit about traditional selling and see if some of this relates to you. Many times, and put your buyer's hat on as we think of this, when you've been in the buying side of the equation, and if you're running your business, part of your job is selling, your services or your product. Part of your job also is on the buying side, right? Whether you're looking at real estate for your office or you're looking at computer systems, all of us in our business and personal life spend a lot of time on the buying side. And I imagine you would agree that many times traditional salespeople are kind of viewed as me-centered versus buyer-centered. And what I mean by that is, we are so excited sometimes, truly, genuinely excited about what it is that we are selling and who we represent. If I'm a salesperson representing a company, we kind of lose sight of the buyer and what's going on. So, hopefully you agree with that. Sometimes, probably no one on this call, but sometimes we view that traditional salesperson as somewhat pushy, aggressive, polished presentations. They have this polished presentation that they come in and do. They even look polished. Lastly, that concept, if you ever watch the movie Glenn Ross, where Alec Baldwin is in front of the sales team and he writes ABC on the board and he's just pounding into these traditional selling people, always be closing. And, so what is the impact of all of this when on the buyer side, when you feel this aggressiveness, this pushiness, this pressure to close? Do you think that that's creating excitement on the buyer side, or do you think it may be creating a fight or flight kind of mechanism triggering in their mindset?
No, it's a definite fight or flight.
And so that's hurting us if we're doing any of those kind of things. And I thought, just because I know it's early on a Monday morning, maybe I'd jump to a video. It's 3 minutes long, show you what this traditional sales approach looks like. And some of you may be familiar with this video and some of the characters in it, but let it rip and just take a look and watch the buyer's body language and facial expression to this traditional sales approach.
Look at the size of that trunk. You could put 3 bodies in there. Just kidding. Just trying to levitate the situation.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate it.
Sure. Hey, what kind of car you drive anyway?
It's a Lexus 430 LS.
That's like a Toyota.
It's a Lexus.
Yeah, Toyota, Lexus, same thing. Japanese, right? Let's not forget Pearl Harbor. Anyway, let's get serious. You want to buy this car, what? Yay or nay?
Well, I don't know. We have to think about it.
Yeah. What's there to think about? I mean, you told me you liked it. You asked me 10,000 questions. I answered every single one of them. You enjoyed it. You love it. What more do you need to know?
It's a lot of money, and we just need the time to consider it.
Consider it. Well, why don't you consider this? You've been breaking my balls for about an hour, asking me about a goddamn accessory in this car.
What about the light? What about this? You
What
cannot
about
talk
this?
to customers like that.
You're not a customer as far as I'm concerned. You want to buy the car or not?
Not from you. I want to see the manager.
You want to see the manager?
Yeah.
I had to stop it right there because it gets a little crude. But you kind of get the idea now. A highly exaggerated traditional salesperson. But you saw a whole lot. And Donna, the Sandler system. You heard him say, man, you asked me 10,000 questions. I answered every single one of them. So you're going to buy the car or what? How is bonding and rapport going right about then?
Out the window.
How is trust doing right there?
Gone.
So, and it's an exaggeration, but I think it kind of drives the point home of how many times the buyers, before we even get there, because of the experiences that they've had, not with you, but all other salespeople, do you think their wall is up or down when you walk in and they know you're there to sell them something?
Yeah, it's true. And it's up. And I think, and I know you'll address this too, but I think we also, we sell how we buy.
Yes.
So there's more kind of psychology involved in the process. So it's these different patterns that are ingrained, the experience we've had being sold to, and the experience we've had buying. So there's a lot of really deeply ingrained things here that as the salesperson, we have to work around.
And unconsciously, we may be doing things that we're not conscious are creating barriers to us selling that may trigger some of those feelings in the buyer's eyes from experiences they've had in the past. So hopefully, you get the sense there. So a Sandler rule, and there's lots of Sandler rules, but if you sound, look, feel like a salesperson, how are you going to be treated?
Like a salesperson.
So the slightest thing you do that sounds like that traditional salesperson, and it could even be in your body and rapport, and you walk in the room and you see that picture, and and you focus on that, you may just trigger what the last salesperson did. So you got to be conscious of it. So we want to be different. So traditional talks a lot, right? They go out there, and the prospect many times says, "Hey, what do you got?" And the salesperson falls right into the trap, and they just go on a tear, telling everything that they know to try to impress the prospect of their knowledge. The contrarian salesperson, what I'm going to talk about, listens more than talks. And we'll talk about how we execute that. Traditional, very enthusiastic. I mean, traditional, they're kind of pounding and jumping up and down, excited about what they're selling. Do you think that instills trust, or do you think that may instill some skepticism?
It's absolutely.
Yeah, it's fake sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Versus curbing our enthusiasm on the contrarian side. Anyone know what PPS is?
No.
It's traditional salesperson's disease, premature presentation syndrome. So,
Okay, that's a new one.
the traditional salesperson kind of shows up and throws up, right? They come out there and, they're doing PowerPoint slides, and they're doing all kinds of presentations, versus the contrarian prevents PPS. They hold off. Not that you never present, but we hold off the presentation until it makes sense to present. And we'll talk about what that means. The traditional approach pushes for a yes, just like you heard in the video clip that we just had. Maybe not as aggressive as that, but some version of it, where the contrarian goes for no. And one of the concepts I want to have you walk away from today, which is the ultimate contrarian, is this concept of going for no as opposed to pushing for a yes. Completely the opposite, yet so powerful when executed properly. And I'll give you examples of how we do that as we go. The traditional tries to convince. The more we push, the more we try to convince, the more the psychological self-defense mechanism kicks in, whereby the contrarian wants to facilitate a process whereby the prospect is the one doing the convincing. It is a magical, magical thing when you can master this approach. And
that's when you know you have them. When they start convincing, they start telling you why they should be buying from you.
And Donna, I imagine when you were saying, geez, you had your way of doing it, then you were learning a new way, and then you couldn't do your old way anymore, but you hadn't perfected the new way. Sometimes there's a chasm, with anything. If you learned a new golf swing, your old way is comfortable, the new way is uncomfortable. And until you work it through, that new golf swing isn't going to be working to your advantage. But you got to work through it. Now, the traditional wings it. They go on a call, and their preparation is, I got my brochures, I got my GPS loaded, let's go, right? That's how they get ready. The contrarian has a system and meticulously prepares. They have pre-call planning sheets that they've filled out. They have a game plan of the questions that they're going to ask. And so it's a different approach. So what is it based on? One, and I want to describe these a little bit. When I see control, it's not control the way that video depicted, where he's trying to have control over the prospect, but by having a systematic approach. More times than not, let me ask you this question. Do you feel like the cards are all in the hands of the buyer and they have control of the process?
I think that's the common thought.
Yeah, most people believe, the salesman, has really no control. The buyer has all the control. So how can we put some more control in your hands in the process, yet not trigger this defense mechanism. So
Right.
it's a delicate approach that we take to control that I'll describe to you. It's about discovery, and we're going to focus a lot of that today in the process of uncovering and asking questions to understand where this buyer is coming from. It's consultative, not salesy. And to be consultative, I imagine most of you are experts in your field. And as Sandler says, you got to know all your stuff. You just can't tell it. And we have a different approach to going through that. And lastly, as I said before, going for no right from the beginning. I do training. I do multi-hour training class. In fact, the class I'm doing later this morning is all on cold calling and prospecting calls. And even in the prospecting call, we go for no, which is totally different than anything you've probably experienced from that perspective. So Sandler believes you got to start at the highest level, which is our mindset going into a call. I could teach you all the process in the world, but we got to make sure that our mindset is in sync with the process. So I always like to start there. Number one, you have to be genuinely interested. And when I say genuinely interested in the human being that you're about to meet with, not the quote unquote prospect you're about to sit down with. So that genuine interest affects your body language. It affects your facial expression. It affects your tone. And those things are really 93% of communication, but they come from your mindset. So number one, ask yourself when you go on your next call, am I genuinely interested in this human being I'm going to meet, or am I there to sell something? You'll come across totally differently.
Right.
Number two, I want to add in a dose of skepticism. And if you're skeptical, what do you think might happen if you're interfacing with another human being?
You're starting on the wrong foot, I would say, when you're already sort of doubting yourself.
Oh, no. So let me reframe that.
Okay.
So my mindset is skeptical from the perspective of, are these people really serious? Is this really a prospect? Right? So I want to be genuinely interested, but a small dose of skepticism to cause me to probe deeper and ask more questions.
Gotcha.
So I'm glad you said that, so I could reframe that a little bit. So a dose of skepticism, and most importantly, being unattached to the outcome. So let's flip it back the other way. Traditional rep is attached to the outcome, emotionally many times, either by way of being under pressure that, man, I need this deal to pay my bills. I need this deal to make payroll. I need this deal to be able to get this higher level of income that I'm shooting for. If you're attached to the outcome, you're going to leak. And you're going to leak that you need the sale, and that's going to hurt you.
Right. Because you'll come across a little bit desperate. Mm-hmm. No one wants to work with someone who's desperate, and the mindset part also goes to confidence, and
yes.
and we've talked about this in Earn More before, but one of the things that gives you great confidence is being clear on your target market, being clear on your message, creating that behavior plan, because the behavior plan is what will keep your pipeline full. And when your pipeline's full, you really are unattached to the outcome of this particular call, because you've got 8 good ones behind it. So everything works together to drive the business forward.
And along those lines, one of the mantras I talk about sometimes is, you got to work on your mindset, but, I'm financially independent and don't need the business. Imagine if you literally had $20 million in the bank and you had this business just because you really have interest in your business, but you didn't have the need to get the deal. If you were financially independent and didn't need the business, how do you think you may come across to the prospect as opposed to where you might be today? Especially if you're new in the business, or struggling in a business that's been around for a while. So that mindset, it's really to affect our tone, our facial expression, our body language, because the communication between you and the buyer is everything. That's what sales is communication. And the Sandler system is a communication system when you peel back the onion. So what is a selling system? It's a process by which you develop an opportunity from beginning to end, right? Step by step, where you are and where you're going. It defines how you get things done. At each step, what are the things that I need to accomplish? What are the stones that I can't leave unturned at this point before I go to the next step? It's a course of action that leads to a decision, and that decision may not be yes. But if it's not going to be yes, when do you want to find out? Sooner or later?
As soon as possible.
ASAP, absolutely. So the other benefit of a system, it's replicable. So as Donna said, as she learned the system, in the beginning it's a little rough because you don't have the skills down 100%. But when you get it down, it is a replicable thing that helps you, and it'll take you less preparation as you go, but I always advocate prepping. But you know where you are at all times in the process and where you're going next. So it's less balls to juggle when you're on a call.
Right. And just to pause there for 1 second, Chip, the other thing about having a replicatable system is, for some of you, it may seem a long way off, and for others, you're there. But the truth is, when you have a system, you can delegate. So you can easily have other people on your team helping with either the entire process, or possibly they're qualifying for you to create meetings for you. And Keith has a question that I know you're going to talk about, so I'm just going to put it out there, and we can talk about it when you get there. But Keith wants to know, what does going for the no mean?
Yeah, so at a high level, and I will answer it in the system, instead of pushing for a yes, you go for a no. And let me give an example. I may say something like, Donna, I'm getting the feeling that maybe you're really not that serious about this, whatever it is you're selling, right? And I'm going to give you lots of examples as we go through, so I don't want to steal my own thunder. So you will see the answer unfold in front of you as we go. So why have a selling system? It gives you control over the process because it's built to do it that way, but not in a controlling way where the prospect feels like they're getting controlled. You'll see how we do that. It enables you to achieve consistent outcomes, and some of those outcomes may be getting that no sooner, which is actually a good thing. Too many people in sales spend time chasing non-deals. And the more time you spend chasing non-deals is less time you have for the real deals that are in your territory. And through that, it creates efficiency. Why would you have an inventory control system? Why would you have an accounting system? We have systems in our business to create efficiency and accuracy, yet in sales, people wing it. So this is something that will help you stay on track, create efficiency, uncover issues sooner. So, and you'll see how that happens. But if I'm doing all the talking and not the listening, I'm not uncovering issues that may be obstacles that may be unsurmountable or insurmountable. So better to uncover those sooner. Give you an example. You're on a call. The people seem interested. They say, hey, Chip, can you go back, give us a proposal? Hey, when would you want it? Oh, can you have it here by Monday? Yeah, sure, great. I go running home. I spend my weekend working on the proposal. I come back Monday. I present the proposal, and my reward for killing my weekend is, oh, my God, if you had let us know it was that expensive, I could have saved you a whole lot of time. There's no way in heck we're ever going to spend that kind of money. Now that,
or even better, you just get crickets after the proposal.
Yeah.
You follow up, and you get nothing.
Absolutely. So, it'll improve your effectiveness. And as Donna said earlier, it's replicable. And replicable, what this means as a business owner, as you get to the point in your business that you bring on salespeople, with a system, you have a framework to train the people so they represent your brand the way you want it to be represented, as a consultative approach, not a high-pressure sales guy. So the positive results of the system, one, many times you may get a yes and a yes sooner. You may get a no, And you may get a no along with a lesson learned, like you're hitting yourself in the side of the head going, oh my God, I didn't follow the system. I didn't ask the questions I was supposed to, and now I got the slow no. Or I may get a no, and it's actually a reward because I'm not chasing these non-deals. I may get a referral whether I got the deal or not. So I teach people that if you get a deal, hey, let's get referrals. And even if you don't get a deal, when I teach cold calling, and you'll get a lot of no's in cold calling, I always say, hey, before I get off the phone, is there anyone that do you think would be open to a conversation with someone like me? Now, 9 out of 10 people say no, but 1 in 10 is worth it to me. To spend the 5 extra seconds, say, geez, I understand this isn't for you. You just bought one of these, but is there anyone else out there that you think would be open to a conversation? So asking for a referral or getting a clear, well understood next step. So by following the system, depending on what you're selling and what that whole decision process looks like, many times it won't be a one call yes no. And understanding your business, as long as you leave that call with a clear, well understood, agreed upon next step, that's a positive outcome. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
So a yes, a no, a referral, or a clear next step would be the outcomes. I already did that video. So what does the Sandler process look like? As you see here, we have this crazy looking submarine. Anyone have an idea why the system is encased within a sub? What is a characteristic of a submarine?
The compartments can be sealed off to each other, and they're in a particular row.
Well, that's one part, but even at a more high level, why did we come up with submarines in wartime? I'll help you. I know it's early. It's a Monday. They're stealth. You can't see them. Like battleships, you see coming, right? Aircraft carriers, you see coming. A submarine was, invented to be stealth, just like some of the stealth bombers we have. And so Sandler's concept there is, as he was putting the system together, he goes, I want to have a system, but from the buyer's perspective, it's just going to look like a conversation. Under the covers, though, are very defined steps that we go through in an order which is all on purpose. So we follow from compartment to compartment within the submarine, just like if you've seen one of those wartime movies like Hunt for Red October, when they move from one compartment to the next, they have that big metal door they close and that big wheel they spin. And the reason they have that is, if there was a depth charge that blew up that one part of the sub, they could seal it off, but keep the rest of the people alive. So the concept there is let's get one step done completely before we move to the next step. So high level, we start with bonding and rapport, but bonding and rapport will have a different meaning. Many times when I ask people, hey, what is bonding and rapport? They say, oh, that's that small talk you have before you get down to business. And to me, bonding and rapport should be much deeper and well prepared than some chit-chat small talk. Because a traditional rep is going to do the chit-chat small talk, talking about the weather, talking about the traffic, as opposed to what we teach in Sandler, which gets into things that we don't have time to do this morning, but things like neuro-linguistic programming, to be able to adapt and adjust to more effectively reflect the buyer, because, and I'll get into that, but buyers and people like people who are like them. And if anyone has seen the Discover ad on TV, where the person is on the phone talking to the office at Discover, and that person on the other end of the phone is actually them.
Yeah.
They're connecting really well. And their tagline is, all about that we treat you like you want to be treated. So again, I always draw in the bonding rapport step a face with giant ears and an antenna above the head that I'm picking up on things about this person because I'm genuinely interested, taking that knowledge that I have and trying to mold myself to be more like that person I'm talking with. Just because at a fundamental level, people like people who are like themselves. And we're not like everyone out there. So it could be things like, hey, this person is and I always think of Seinfeld when I say this, a soft talker, right? If I'm a loud talker and I'm with a soft talker and I just keep going, what do you think is going to happen to rapport?
One-sided.
It's going to be one-sided, and they're going to be cringing and moving away. Where if I just tweak my tone and lower the volume a little bit, that's going to more reflect the person I'm meeting with. So, I mean, I teach 6 hours of content just on bonding and rapport, but that gives you an idea. And again, it's all about being them focused, not me focused, right? And so let me continue. Actually, let me go to the next one. So we have this concept of upfront contracts, and I'm going to take you through these steps with examples. But the upfront contract is the idea of having agreement at each step with the prospect before it happens. So upfront means before, contract means agreement. So rather than me just blowing and going and showing up and throwing up, I'm going to be sitting down and going through a meticulous process of agreement to build comfort with the prospect. Even in a cold call, I do a mini upfront contract. And I say something like, hey, let me tell you why I called. If you give me 30 seconds, you tell me if it makes sense to continue. Are you comfortable with that? That's my mini upfront contract on a cold call. How many people do that? Probably hardly any.
Right.
But it lowers that wall, that defense mechanism before I even get into who I am and what we do. The next compartment is huge. This is the heart and soul of Sandler, and it's pain, which means in this step, I'm there to uncover the issues and challenges and problems that prospect may have that we may be able to help them solve. But I'm probing not just surface pain, but I'm getting deeper in that conversation to understand what the impacts are, both financially and personally, to that human being that I'm meeting, to ascertain whether those issues and challenges are a big enough deal for them to contemplate as we move to the next step, budget, pull money out of their bank account to give to me to fix their problem, right? So pain and budget are completely intertwined. And what I'd say with most salespeople, they may do a little bit of pain probing, but probably not deep enough. They may have a budget conversation, but usually either too early or too late in the process. So budget comes after pain on purpose, and it's a conversation. It isn't, so what's your budget? It's a conversation about what their willingness is to invest to fix their problem. And now it could be pain or gain. If you're writing notes down, some of us sell solutions that both solve pain, but also create gain. So you'd have pain and gain kind of questions in that part. Decision. Now this isn't, okay, make a decision. This is, let me probe to understand how this organization that I'm selling to goes about making the decision. What is the timeline, perfect world of them making that decision? Who would need to be involved? What would they need to see? Who are they looking at? What do they like and who they've seen? What don't they like? Really digging deeper. I've done sessions where we came up with over 50 decision questions that we could ask at that point in the sales process. Fulfillment. This step is where we now have the opportunity to present our solution. And we're presenting solutions only to the pains we've uncovered. So if I haven't uncovered any pain earlier in the process, I really don't have anything to present. And even when we get around to doing the presentation, we start with a summary of our understanding of their issues and challenges. And then we show meticulously how our solution will address their issues. And then built into that process that I'll show you, the 4-step process in fulfillment, is the close, which is the most low-key close in the world. The close should be no pressure on you, no pressure on them. and it is magical when it works, when you have that down. And then lastly, the post-sell. And the post-sell is an area that most people miss in their sales process, where we address the potential for buyer's remorse. Anyone here ever buy something and then they get home and they're like, oh my God, did I do the right thing? You know, you have your little guy inside your head starting to question what you did. Or
Yeah.
you may be married and you come home and your spouse goes, you did what? You spent how much? And as a salesperson, we may literally leave our deal at risk if we don't deal with it up front.
Right.
So we talk in the post-sell on how to help the prospect deal with the potential of buyer's remorse, or deal with incumbent vendors. So if you're in a environment where you're replacing other vendors, having that conversation about how they will address that conversation with the current vendor that they're leaving, and how will they react when the current vendor says, you got to be kidding me, after all these years we've helped you, you're now leaving? We'll give you a 20% discount to stay. And then they call you and they go, oh geez, Chip, I got some bad news. Are you sitting down? We decided we're going to cancel this contract. I've already called the bank, and we're going to stay with our current guy. So dealing in the post-sell with things that can blow your deal up in an effective manner.
And I think also, Chip, some of the stuff that might come up in post-sale could also possibly have been addressed in pain.
Yes.
Because, part of pain is, well, how are you handling it now? What's working? What's not working? So then when you get to post-sale, where they're switching from, and you can be, when we have someone come to us, sometimes they're firing someone. That's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So it's really important to know about that and to be able to have the conversation and even provide some consulting and support around how you've helped other people to make that transition, because there's always a transition involved.
Yeah, so in that, and I'm glad you brought that up, Donna, in that post-sell step, and I'm just giving a high view right now,
Right.
But is addressing it up front and literally coaching your new client on pitfalls that may trip your deal up.
Right.
So you're prepared to do it. A great example I use there is I was hiring a guy in Atlanta who I used to work with, and so we went through the interview process. He met people all the way up the line. We agreed, hey, we're going to offer you this job to be a sales manager in the Southeast U.S. And he signed the paper, said, yeah, I'm coming on board. I'm like, all right, thank God that's done. I got that behind me. He's starting on Monday. Sunday night, my phone rings at my house. It's John calling me up from Atlanta. He goes, Chip, are you sitting down? I got some bad news. When I went in on Saturday to my boss to quit, he came back, gave me a counteroffer that I couldn't refuse. I'm staying. And I'm like, oh my God. When I learned the post-sell step, and if you're in the hiring role, I teach management, sales management. We have a post-sell in our interviewing process to deal with the potential of that. And I could have coached him through, here's what may happen. Have you thought about how you'd respond to that if they did this? And at least have a chance to coach him through that, so my thing didn't blow up at the end. So that's post-sell does a whole bunch of things like that. So now I want to just drill in a little deeper to give you some examples. And the first question we had about go for no, how we deploy that through the sub. So we have a term called stripping line, which is part of this go for no. And stripping line is, if you'd ever gone fishing before, the amateur fishermen, where they feel a bite on the line, what do you think they do?
Pull.
They pull, right? They yank on the line. And how many of us have done that when we were kids? And what do we have on the other end of the line?
Nada.
Nothing, right? Even the worm is gone. The worm is gone and I have no fish. So that's a little bit of PPS. An experienced fisherman does what is counterintuitive. And when they feel the bite on the line, they strip line, which means pulling extra line out of the reel to create slack so that the fish, it has a more natural environment and they now ingest the worm. And then when you pull on it, what do you think happens?
They're hooked.
They're hooked right inside, and now you're not losing the fish. So this concept of stripping line, we bring into this process, this contrarian process of going the opposite direction that a prospect would ever expect a salesman to go. That's what stripping line is. Just like in fishing, not yanking on the pole, but stripping line would be doing the opposite of what would feel natural to you in a sales role. So the goal is to be non-salesy, to be the complete opposite, to ultimately get the truth, and even if that truth hurts, to get that truth. And the outcome of this concept is that you'll enjoy the unique phenomenon of being sold by your prospect. It is amazing when you get this down. And I'll give you examples of how we do that within the context of the Sandler system. So, but before I do it, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah. Hi, Chip. We have a couple of comments and questions. So first off, from Connie, she's just reiterating the replicable point that you made, where she had a client once that she saw and she wasn't able to connect with them personally. So she turned the client over to a member of her staff. That person was able to connect well with the client and they were able to close the deal, which, harkens back to what you and Donna were saying about being able to hand off parts of it when need be.
Yeah.
The next one we have is from Christina. She says, can you give an example of identifying prospects' budget, i.e. the pain and gain conversation, or uncovering their value of the problem solved?
I will. Yes, we're not there yet.
Okay. And then I think that's all we've got right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I will definitely address that, Christina, within the next few minutes. So
yeah, and just before we go on, just for everyone on the session, this is always a very interactive, popular session. And when Chip is done, I will continue this conversation, knowing some of you.
Yeah.
So write your questions down, put them in the chat window. We will continue the conversation.
Awesome. So the upfront contract, again, a system has steps. Within each step, the upfront contract, or UFC, as you see on the screen, has some key steps that we teach to go through that. And one is, even before you start the call, hey, what is the objective of this call? So that may sound like, hey, Bill, my objective today is to really spend a little bit of time with you to understand kind of what's going on, what prompted you to agree to this meeting in the first place. But before we begin, we talked on the phone about getting together for an hour from 10 to 11. Are you still good with that? How many times do we miss this element? And how about how many times when we set an appointment on the phone, we said, why don't we get together at 10, but we don't talk about the duration of the call. And that can backfire if you don't do it. A simple little thing like that, where the prospect's thinking, okay, I'll give Chip 5 minutes. I'm thinking I got an hour, and I'm 5 minutes into it. I haven't even gotten out of bonding and rapport, and the guy goes, hey, can you leave me some brochures? I got a meeting I got to go to. Thanks for coming.
Nice.
And what do you think happened there? Not much.
Right.
Agendas. Again, being them focused, I begin with their agenda. And it may sound like this: hey, Donna, I appreciate you coming out, or having me come out to you if that's the case. I'm sure before I got here, you were thinking of things you wanted to accomplish on the call. What would be some things that you're hoping we get done today? And she'll tell me, oh, I want to learn about your company. I want this and this and this. And, I can agree or not agree. I mean, some of the things may not make sense. But then we get that down. Then I go to my agenda. Hey, Don, I appreciate all that. And I'm glad to cover those things. What I want to do is really, I'd ask you a bunch of questions today, and I want to make sure you're going to be comfortable with that. And some of these questions may go deeper than you're used to getting on a sales call. I just want to make sure before we start the call, you'll be okay with that, even if there's some tough questions. Now, by me saying that, do you think I sound like a traditional rep, or do you think I sound more consultative?
You sound more consultative, and the real point here that I want to make sure everyone understands as we go through this process is not only is this a stealth system that works to improve your new business development, it is an amazing way to establish trust and position yourself as a professional and differentiate yourself from everyone else. So that concept of do they want to do business with you is you're laying the groundwork for being completely different than your competition right out of the gate. And that just can't be understated in this process.
And especially when you get to this last step, which is beginning with the end in mind. If you ever read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, one of those tenets is begin all things with the end in mind. Well, how about beginning your sales call with the end in mind? And not only in mind, but really talk about it up front. And the words of this piece would sound something like, Donna, at the end of this meeting, one of a couple things may happen. You may make the determination that for whatever reason, your company and mine are not a fit. And Donna, would you be comfortable at the end of the meeting, if that is the case, sharing that with me? And she would say, usually they go, they give me kind of a look like a dog when they tilt their head, and they'll go, yeah, why not? And then I follow that with, hey, I may uncover some things about your situation that I don't feel might be a good fit for our solution. And hopefully you wouldn't take offense at the end of the call if I determine that we're not a fit. Would you be okay if I told you that at the end of this meeting? And they always go, yeah, sure. I mean, and it's refreshing to them. They're like, oh my God, this guy isn't trying to shove something down my throat. And then I usually throw my hands up in the air and I go, and who knows, maybe we'll actually determine there is a fit. And if that's the case, we can either, proceed to the next step and figure out what that next step is. So why don't we carve the last few minutes out for this meeting to figure out where we want to go from here? Are you comfortable with that? That's an upfront contract.
And it's just so smooth. And it's the beginning it's the first place where, the way I say it to people is, this may not be you, this may not be the case with you, but sometimes when I meet with people, they love everything I have to say. But for a number of reasons, timing, budget, whatever it might be, they're not able to move forward. Will you be comfortable saying no? And I won't take it personally. And I do think it's so refreshing, and that's where you're setting up going for the no. Right?
Yeah, that's your first go for no.
Right.
Which I tell you, the objective, and you always have to know what is the objective, is to set them at ease. That's all I'm trying to do here. So the tone and the speed with which you do it is critical. Now I'm keeping an eye on the time, so I'm going to jump to the next compartment. Actually, I had to give you what I just said before. So, we're not a fit for everyone is one of the concepts that Donna just deployed in her way. And we always want you to say it your way. So we give you the framework, but we still want you to be you. So some people may use words like that. Some may say, at the end of the conversation, if you determine we're not a fit, I want you to be comfortable to share that with me. Are you okay with that? Right? We kind of gave that example. So that's go for no in the upfront contract. How about pain? So pain is the gap between where you are and where you wish you were. So how many of us have solutions that fill that gap to help someone get to where they want to go? I would think most of us do. I've worked with financial planners. I've worked with attorneys. I've worked with technology companies. I've worked with hosting companies, staffing companies. Everyone usually fills a gap. But what we want to do, most salespeople, if they understand the concept, don't get below the surface. And what we teach is how to dig deep, peel back those layers, and really get the prospect to begin to open up. And I use the term share the dirty laundry, but just kind of open up their kimono and let us see what's going on. Why do you think that's crucial?
Well, in my experience, I think the reason that's crucial is it's not uncommon for them to think they need one thing, but they might need something else. And I think this process is also co-creating where there might be a solution.
Yeah, so all of those are true, right? Co-creating, but even by way of rapport building, and one of the concepts I want to have you walk away with this morning is the more they talk, the more they like you. And in the pain step, they're doing most of the talking. The more they talk, the more they like you. One of the Sandler rules is a 70-30 rule. Your goal should be to get them to speak 70% of the time on a call. But even more importantly than all that, they are giving themselves ammunition to make a decision with more facts that will help them rationalize whether their willingness to spend the money is there or not. Where if I just kept it to the surface, there may not be enough momentum or motivation in their own minds, not my mind, their mind. So by me asking the questions and them having this dialogue, they come to a realization that may be different, and it's a discovery that they go through about their own situation that may be different than when you walked in the room. They not only do you truly understand their situation, but they may understand their situation at a much deeper level than they realized before you got there. It is magic. It is magical. So peeling that back, what is the business impact? When I say that, I'm talking about quantification of the business financial impact of the pain. That's what I'm talking about. And if they're giving you their numbers, people don't argue with their own data. So I'm not going to tell them about someone else. That doesn't matter. What matters is them. So I want to pull that from them. I want to understand even below the business impacts, what are the personal consequences? So even if you're selling a B2B solution, there are personal consequences to pain many times. And then, how big is it? What would the prospect lose by not doing business with you if they just stayed the course? So this is the concept of pain. I want to give an example of going for no or stripping line in the pain compartment. After I get them talking and they start sharing this with me, the risk is if I'm attached to the outcome, under the table, I'm giving myself a high five going, oh, baby, I got one, right? But I don't want to be doing that. I want to do the opposite. And I may say something lightly, not condescendingly, tone is everything, but I may look at the person and go, geez, but I'm just getting a sense that this isn't a high priority. Remember the slide earlier, I said by stripping line, you may facilitate a process whereby the prospect sells you instead of you selling the prospect. This is a magical line. If executed at the right time with the right tone. I've had prospects come back and literally sometimes 4-letter words come across the desk where they're saying, are you out of your flipping mind? If I don't get this fixed, the business is going to crash and burn, and I'm going to lose all the money I invested in it. Who's selling who at that point?
They are selling you. It's a beautiful thing.
It is so cool when you get this down. So that's an example of it. I'll sometimes ask this one, geez, let me ask you between you and me, is this enough to care about? So assuming I get the right kind of answers, I'm going to move to the budget step. And actually before the budget step, I can't teach you everything in 1 hour because I got like a year's worth of material, but I always like to sum up and use active listening at the end of the pain step, which would sound something like, so let me see, Donna, if I understand you right. I think what you told me is pain, 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 pain. Am I missing anything? So even when I sum up, I end with a question to get them to open up. When they hear their pain back, sometimes it triggers something else that they didn't share. And now I'm going into a more lengthy discussion on pain, which is awesome. The more pain you get surfaced, the greater the chance you're going to sell the deal. So assuming I get through all that, I move into the budget step, and I want to uncover their expectations or limitations before I ever begin working on proposals and presentations. I will tell you, when I was in the high-tech business and I would go on a call and I would do a surface level pain step, and they would say, hey, this is great. Can we see a demo? And, I would schedule like a 2-hour demo. I prep for 2 hours for the demo. I'm driving an hour each way. I just invested 6 hours. We've never once talked about budget before I did that. So, following the system, I'm going to know clearly whether or not what I'm selling is even within, the potential scope of what they're contemplating. So we want to definitely do the budget step before we get there. How would we do it? How would I deploy this contrarian approach? I would use words like this. If I told you that we're never the lowest cost provider, should we continue talking? Now that's people.
I just got to tell you, let me interrupt 1 second there, Chip. That for me actually has become part of my the very beginning of my pain process. Mm-hmm. I say to them, we're never the least expensive option. And if you're purely a price buyer, we're probably not going to be a good fit, because that's just, I want to say that right in the beginning, because we're never going to be the least expensive option.
It'll save you so much time.
It has, I can't tell you how much time it saved me.
And the other thing it does, it like changes their view of you right up front, right? And we had the upfront contract in the beginning where, we've told them, hey, we may not be a fit. 9 times out of 10, what's going through my head when I say we're not a fit is the person's not going to be willing to spend the money that it's going to take to fix the issue. And that's okay with me, right? Some will, some won't, so what? Someone's waiting, next. Let me move on. So this is just one example. Another one would be, assuming you came to believe that we had the best solution, and I know we're not there yet, but you found yourself looking at an investment of about $25,000, would you be reluctant to continue our discussion? Right? I want to surface the bomb before it goes off, right? I want to diffuse the bomb before it goes off. So, and you don't have to use a number like that. You could use a range. You say, typically someone might invest between X and Y when they look at our solution. Is that something that you'd be reluctant to even consider? So you can put it in your words, but I'm not saying, hey, what's your budget? Because what happens, does that wall go up or down when you say, what's your budget?
Way up.
Goes way up, right? It becomes uncomfortable for them, uncomfortable for you. When you put your buyer's hat on, you're like, oh yeah, he just wants to find my budget, and then he's going to raise his price to whatever I give him, and I'm going to get ripped off. That's what that's going to trigger. So we don't want to do that. Another version would be, you couldn't really see yourself investing this kind of money, could you? And I want them to sell themselves, not me sell them. So these are just some examples of stripping line. The decision step, here's where I want to drill into the who, what, where, when, why, and how of the decision process. This is an area that most people don't dig deep enough, and the impact of that is the answers to the questions that they didn't ask rear their ugly head 2 months down the line, and it's too late at that point. So I'll give you some examples. I want to get answers to these kinds of questions, and look at deals you're working on now. Do you know the answers to, who other than the person I'm meeting with is going to be involved in this decision process? Do I understand who else they're looking at? Do I understand the steps involved in the process that they're going through? Do we understand what could possibly derail the process? Right? That's a great counterintuitive question. We ask someone, oh, well, perfect world, when do you want to, move in or have this solution started? And they go, oh, next month. Well, do we ask the next question? Hey, well, what could derail that process? What could cause this thing to get off track? What are your criteria to move forward? I'm not saying you're looking with us, but just generally, what are some of your criteria? And they always go price. I go, okay, that I understand that, but other than price, what are your criteria? Where are you in the process now? How do you go about making these decisions? When do you need this decision to be made? And the follow-up question is more important than that question, which is, so why is that date important? What if that date slips? What are the consequences? You think these questions may be a little deeper than you're doing today?
You know, and the other thing I really think about this is also your opportunity to get a better sense of what it's going to be like to work with this company beyond the person you've been dealing with.
Well,
So,
and also, Donna, is this a process I'm willing to go through?
exactly. That's exactly what I meant.
Good.
We recently brought on a new client. It's a significant client. It's an association that is run by a volunteer board. And we said very early on in the process, we cannot pitch, you know, we made it clear to the board that there was these two people we were talking to that we would be happy to address all their questions. But, you know, Kelly, you were there too. I'm like, you know, I don't even know if it makes sense to do a proposal. You've got an entire board you've got to deal with. What's that going to be like? And the process went very well, and we made it very clear that we can't work with a client where every decision will be a decision by the board. So if you'd like to work together, we need to have a point person. And we do. And it's great. So, you know, you can train so the other thing about this whole process is sellers have rights in the process as well. So this is setting the tone for a number of different things.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, and the idea is, one of my themes is I don't want to leave any stone unturned, right? That stone that I leave unturned is going to pop up later, and I got to find out up front before I'm investing my time doing proposals and presentations, right? I want to have a clear understanding of what I'm walking into before I get there.
Absolutely.
So that's the key concept here. So in the decision step, stripping line may sound something like, well, you probably don't need buy-in from the executive team, right? Which is
yes, I do.
and now you figure that out, right? You don't see yourself making a decision on this anytime soon, though, do you? But this couldn't get vetoed, could it? Who's ever had a decision where you're at the mid-level and someone at a higher level vetoes it? Who could stop this decision dead in its tracks? That's one of my favorite questions.
Oh, that's good.
So you know, that gives you some sense. You know, some objectives is to not trigger their defense mechanism, right? To have them convince me more than me convince them. I want them to convince me that the issues, the problems, the challenges that they have are critical, and they need my help to get that done. I want to avoid happy years. Happy years is where I don't ask enough questions. The prospect says something like, oh yeah, we're really serious, we're really interested, I'm the guy, and we just take the answers to our first question. I know Donna's going to spend some time with you about digging more with questions. It's all about avoiding happy years. Happy years syndrome is where I translate everything I hear at a high level into, oh, baby, I got one. Prevent PPS, as we talked about before. Be non-threatening. Again, it's more about tone than anything, but having those questions prepared before you get there. It's about being buyer-centric, them-focused, listening more than talking. It's about reducing pressure, lowering that defense mechanism, that defense wall that most prospects have up. And it's getting truth on the table. I want to be a truth facilitator for their benefit in mind, right? I really believe it's not just, you know, for me to have the answers, but for both of us to know so they don't spend their time on something that's going to be a dead end. So what I want to do, because I know we're a little past the time,
Okay.
you know, what would be some lessons learned? What would be some things that you're going to take away from this high-level discussion on having a contrarian approach to selling that you'd be glad? We'll spend the next couple of minutes, share a couple of those.
Okay.
Whoops.
So Connie had a comment here, and Connie, I want to ask you to clarify a little bit on that.
Yep.
Connie said, I found that I was spending a lot of time with people who couldn't afford assisted living. So now I tell them the average cost and ask if that works for them. And I'm sure, Connie, you're getting more no's a lot quicker. At what point in your sales process are you doing that? That's my question for you.
For me?
No, for Connie.
Oh, good. Yeah, for Connie, because the key is timing and sequence.
Right.
I don't know if Connie's going to answer, but what I'd be doing, and I love what you're doing there, Connie, because it's going to save you so much time to figure that out up front, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely. And Kelly, why don't you scroll back and make sure we've answered the other questions that were put out there.
Yeah, we had the go for the no, and then Christina said the example of identifying the prospect's budget, which I believe you did go through. So Christina, if we didn't answer that, if Chip didn't answer that, just let us know. But he did have those 2 slides with all the different questions, which I think are really helpful. So let us know.
Yeah, I know we're kind of skimming the surface, but hopefully you're getting the concept of it, that we want to qualify hard up front and close easy on the back end. And
Yes.
so I really spent more time. I wanted you knowing that we just had an hour on the things that'll, you know, how to present your solution. The only thing that I would add after that decision step is begin all your presentations with a summary, and it could be one-on-one sitting there with a couple handwritten bullets of some of the key pains you uncovered before you go into your presentation or proposal, right? Because it just shows that you listened and that you care. And it is a huge differentiator, just those 2 things, listening and caring.
Right. And Christina wants to know, what is PPS again?
Premature presentation syndrome. It's just a goofy thing I came up with.
It is a little goofy, but I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Connie answered. She says she asks it in the beginning, the range, but not the first thing.
Well, again, do it after pain. Now, budget comes after pain on purpose, and I know I didn't stress this enough. It doesn't mean you do it before pain, because if you get this pain conversation, their budget may increase a little bit more. It happens, right? I mean, especially looking at assisted living, you know, there's the reality of what the budget is, but there may be different ways to get that money that they may not have contemplated. And what are the costs of other approaches, and how important is it to them to get this loved one the care that they need, right? I look at the pain step has got to be that personal, emotional conversation before budget, because sometimes it affects what their willingness, budget's all about willingness to spend, right? Even with assisted living, right? My dad just went through that. And, you know, it cost a ton of money, but I wanted him to be in a place he was comfortable in that would give him the help that he wanted, that I knew people that had gone there before that were satisfied with what they had. I literally just went through that. And we ended up spending way more than I thought I would. And, you know, so sometimes people have their wall up in the beginning. So too soon would be before pain. Pain, they're doing a lot of talking. You're doing a lot of listening. You're building some trust as that happens. And it's just to get truth out on the table. Sometimes buyers are liars, especially when it comes to admitting what they're willing to spend. You have to earn that trust before we ask that in the pain step.
And I just want to repeat that because it's so true. Buyers are liars. Every one of you does it. You walk into a clothing store, need any help? Nah, just so. And Connie adds, she was saying the exact same thing as you were talking. Sometimes it's the unwillingness to spend the money, and I think that's really true. So you know, asking is having that conversation could change what they're willing to spend.
Yeah, and I always say, Connie, there's 2 things. There's ability and willingness. Willingness is more profound than ability. There's many people that have the ability but don't have the willingness. Right. There's many people that don't have the ability but have the willingness, and they find the money somewhere.
Right.
It may be an uncle. It may be you know, some other family member to help out. You know, you look at debt in America is proof that people spend more than their budget. Who doesn't have debt out there?
Very true.
So hopefully this was helpful.
Yes.
Hopefully you came out of here with some things that will help you in your sales process.
Great.
And,
So Chip, thank you so much for your time. You know, even though I spent a whole year in class, and you and I have done this quite a few times at this point, I get something out of it every time. And so I really thank you once again for lending your energy and expertise and spirit to the Earn More process. So thank you very, very much.
okay, thank you, Donna. Thank you, team, and hope to see you at a Morris County Chamber event.
There you
sometime
go.
soon.
All right. Talk soon. And to all of our Earn More people on the call, what we will do is we will now take a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we will continue this conversation, and we will ask more questions. We will answer more questions. We'll talk about open-ended questions. So think about, while we're taking this 5-minute break and for the duration of this session, try to think about some circumstances that you've had that now that you know what you know about having a sales process, maybe you would have done differently. So 5 minutes and we will be back.
Cool.
All right, I'm going to just mute and stop my video. Was that 5 minutes? Okay. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Kelly, I'm going to have you monitor chat windows because I am going to continue the conversation with a presentation that I've done in the past.
Okay. Does it help you if I do like a hand signal, or should I just try to get it out? I'll do a little wave or a hand.
A wave would be fabulous. You wave away. All right, so let's go from the beginning. And let's swap. Okay. So, when Chip presents, it's a little bit of a fire hose, right? It's this so much information all at once and can be a little bit overwhelming. So that's why I want to continue the conversation. And you all have really heard me talk about some of this stuff throughout the program. But, you know, I was thinking about a couple of things as Chip went through his presentation. And I'm not kidding about when I first started the training, which, by the way, I highly recommend you look into. I had 2 big wins very early on that paid, I think I paid $10,000 for the training, and these 2 wins absolutely covered the cost that I would not have gotten had I not taken this training. And I'm going to tell you one of them because it singularly paid for the whole thing. We do some, as all of you probably know, one of the things that we do is we provide meeting support services. So if a company or an organization is having a meeting, they tend to focus on venue, logistics, content, attendees, and we can do the whole back office. And I had a client that we were doing mailings for, very clerical work, and she called and she said she had another meeting that she was going to do, and could I help to receive registrations, send out confirmations, maintain reports. It was very administrative. It was very much right up our alley. And I had recently begun in Sandler. I had no idea what to charge this woman. And she needed a number as a budget because she would, it was a pharmaceutical meeting, she would put our cost as a line item. So I went through the process with the submarine, upfront contract, you know, the bonding and rapport, pain, decision-making process. And I said to her, listen, I know that this is new for you to outsource, but I don't suppose you have a budget for this work. And she said, no, I really don't. She said, but we have allocated X number of internal hours, and that comes to $10,000. So in essence, her budget was $10,000. So now, had I not taken Sandler, I would have gotten off of that call. I would have did what I always do, which is I write my proposals in Excel. I think in Excel. What are the elements of this project that have to be done? The project management, and I calculate everything in Excel. Now I have to tell you, when I did my proposal in Excel for this particular client, I was working to get it higher than like $6,000. So I went back to her, I laid out the proposal, and I told her that it was $9,550, and she signed it that day, and we got started. Now, if I hadn't taken Sandler and drilled for budget, I would have charged her $5,000 or $6,000. She would have been weary. She might have even been leery of me because that price was too low. So I just have to tell you that right there, the training paid for itself. I had another person come in looking for administrative support. Turned out he really needed an office, and he rented an office. So I harp on this a bit because it's a little bit outside of everybody's comfort zone, but it's really, really important, and it really, really works. So I'm done ranting. I will now go on with my presentation, which some of it overlaps, but it overlaps in a different way. So Chip talked about pre-call work and being prepared for your call. I couldn't agree more, but some of the specific ways I would recommend you do this: Google their name, Google their company, check out their LinkedIn profile, and by all means, take a look at their website and see if they have a mission, values, vision statement. Because you want to see, we know from Simon Sinek and the Golden Circle, why you do what you do is the real connector. So you want to get a sense of what their values are so that you can interject those values into your conversation at various points throughout the submarine. You know, Connie, you talked about having someone work with someone else in your company because they couldn't relate to you, and that happens. We've mentioned the DISC profile in the past. I had an office tour with a guy who was a high S. He was a supporter, and he was very statistical and analytical, and that was something I was very, very uncomfortable with. And when I did my research before he came, I noticed on his LinkedIn profile it was, you know, all these very techie things. And then he belonged to a group for some sort of dogs. And that was my hook. In the bonding and rapport, I talked about something about dogs, and it was like opening the box, and he started talking. So that research can sometimes be the way you crack the door wide open and build trust. And of course, we've talked about bonding and rapport. Oops, let me switch. Okay. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. People do business with why you do what you do, not what you do. You have to build rapport. And your research will help you build rapport. Chip talked about the upfront contract. It can be as simple as, thanks for seeing me. I've budgeted an hour for this meeting. Does that still work for you? And I like to say, as we decide how we're going to spend this hour together, tell me what would make this a good use of your time. I really try and put it in their lap and ask them how we can help them. Now, I'm going quickly because I want to get to the open-ended questions. Do a call interrupt. I know you get so many of these calls, but if we could talk for a minute, you can then decide if it makes sense for us to continue to talk longer. Does it make sense? How long do we have? Is this a good time? If I call somebody and they sound rushed, I'm not talking to them. Hey, listen, sounds like I caught you at a bad time. Let me call you back another time. And they go, no, I'm fine. I'm like, okay, well, and then I keep going. So don't continue your call or your meeting if you know that you're going to be rushed. If you've scheduled a 1-hour call and like Chip said, they give you 5 minutes, say, you know what, I can't do you justice and I can't do me justice. Let's reschedule when you have more time. And one of two things will happen then. They will reschedule or they will tell you they actually have the hour. And that's happened as well. As far as calling goes, nobody likes to do it. I do, because I know it really works. And I say this all the time. I don't love going to the gym, but I love how the gym makes me feel. So these calls that you're making, and a lot of you are not making cold calls, but do them first thing in the morning and get them over with. You know, we've talked about this. Your business development is a numbers game. We're ultimately trying to figure out the formula of what you have to do to drive the amount of revenue that you want to drive. And I can tell you, making calls and following up is definitely going to be part of it. So do them first thing in the day. You will feel accomplished and you will have those, however many calls you've decided you're going to do, done. Chip really talked about this, but this is where the magic is. And the land of open-ended questions is where you want to be. Like Chip said, the more you can get them to talk, that's an indication that they like you and they're interested. So we're going to just run through a bunch of open-ended questions, and then we'll kind of open it up for full conversation. And Kelly, I know you will, but if you would get and forward Chip's slides and forward these slides to everyone as well. Mm-hmm. And I want you to think about creating, this goes into your playbook. We've talked about you creating a playbook. So far, you've got your written mission, values, vision statement. You know that elevator pitch that you wrote? Well, that might come into your calls. Hey, listen, typically people call us because ABC. May not be the case with you, but maybe we should talk for 30 seconds and see if it is. So again, a lot of what you're using here might be something you've already written that you are once again repurposing. So in the pain, what are the issues? What's not working? Why are they talking to you? It's a discovery process. You're the doctor, they're the patient. I say this to people all the time. I probably said it to each one of you when we began our discovery call for Earn More. Listen, I'd like to get a sense of where you are, where you'd like to be. Let's take a look at that gap and see if I can help you. If I can, great. If I can't, say no, because I really will not take it personally. And I really want you to get into that habit of, in the upfront contract, saying, you're going to have questions, I'm going to have questions. You might decide this isn't a fit. I might decide this is not a fit. Will you be comfortable saying no? I honestly feel that's an important thing to say, because so many people, well, what was it? Buyers are liars. They're going to say, well, I need to think it over. Well, what's going to change? So you're finding the gap between what they have and what they want, what is and what will be, old and new, where they are and where they want to be. So here are some magic open-ended questions. Tell me more. So the other thing is, when they give you an answer, I want you to go deeper, because what someone says, and this is scientific, what the answer a person gives the first time is not necessarily the real answer. They may not trust you yet, and so they are telling you what they feel is public information as opposed to the real situation. So tell me more about, help me to understand. Some of you are old enough to remember Columbo. He seemed like a really dumb guy that asked a whole lot of questions. You want to be the quote-unquote dumb person that asks a whole lot of questions. So help me to understand. Can you give me an example of that? Be more specific. How long has that been going on? Now, when I ask someone how long that's been going on, part of what I'm building here is a quantifiable case for why they should invest in my services. So many of us have services that could be considered administrative, operational, so they may be considered an expense. I want you to frame your services in terms of an investment. It's an investment in your peace of mind because you know your accounting is being done right. It's an investment in knowing that your elderly parents are being well taken care of. So, you know, think in terms of an investment, and I think thinking in terms of an investment levels the buyer-seller field as well. And in this open-ended process, you might be able to quantify the cost of them not making a change. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Oops. Sorry. All right. How long have you been dealing with it? What have you tried to do about it? How many ways have you tried to fix this? If they've tried 4 different ways to fix this, that's a really good thing for you. If they really haven't tried anything, you might have to dig a little deeper. What else have you looked at? What was good about that? What would you improve? Sometimes I'll say to them, and this comes back to profile and personality, paint me a picture. What would the ideal situation look at? Because people process visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically. So if you can figure out which type they are, and sometime if you're in their office, you really can, because how their office is decorated, organized, unorganized, family pictures, no family pictures, you can kind of get a better sense of who they are. But paint me a picture, or if you could write this story any way you want, what would the story be? So get them to paint you a picture. And when they've tried other things, why did it work? Why didn't it work? And then these 2 questions here, what has this cost you so far, and what is it costing you not to change, are really powerful questions, and you might have to go deeper. So when they say, if I was to say, what is it costing you to not change? Well, I'm spending too much time on things that take me away from driving my business forward. All right, well, if you were spending more time driving your business forward, what would that mean to you? Well, I would close more deals. Great. On average, hypothetically, not going to hold you to it, what's a deal worth to you? And then they give me a range. And that's how I'm quantifying it. That's how I'm asking more questions. And they're coming back to me.
And just to add too, a lot of people we find don't think that way. So they don't even realize how much money they're actually losing by not fixing the problem. So it might be something that they know it's a problem, but they're not aware of just how expensive that problem is. And that's something you can help them figure out.
Right. It could be the impact. It could be possibly operationally. They're you know, the way they're running their operation is having a negative impact. Well, they know it's having a negative impact, but what do they think that means? Well, you know, people aren't really as happy as they should be. Well, if they were happy, what would happen? They'd be more productive. If they were more productive, what would that look like for you? Well, I wouldn't have to be in the office so much. Great. Do you think they might sell more if they were happier? So Kelly's right. And this is kind of what Chip was talking about. They don't always understand the full impact. And so we're still in diagnosis stage. We're asking questions. And the other part that definitely comes into it for me, and some of you, and certainly you, Connie and Crystal, but you know, how do you feel about that? I mean, what a tough thing to have an aging parent. I think it's great at a certain point if you've built that bonding and rapport, if the conversation is going well. How do you feel about that? Now you're getting into the real heart of the matter. And the other thing is, if I say to them, how many times have you tried to fix this, and they say, oh, I've hired 4 people and none of them work. Are you ready to do something different? Because you are. If you are, maybe we can help. But if you're not ready to do something different, I really can't help you. No, I really want to change. I know I have to do something. So a lot of these questions, to some extent, are designed to almost take the sale away from them. So if you take the sale away from them and they pull it back, to me, that's kind of what Chip means also by stripping line. Give them more, give them more, give them more. Let them pull it back in. And at the end, you know, is there anything else you think I should know? No matter how unimportant you think it is. So you keep them talking as long as you can. Now, sometimes, and Chip didn't talk about this, so I'm going to. There's 2 things that happens in this process. Is people are going to ask you questions that you're not ready to answer that are actually part of your another piece of the process. Maybe they are on budget, maybe they're on decision making, maybe they're even on implementation. But if someone asks me a question that I'm not ready to answer, I validate it and I reverse. And so what that means is they say, well, who would be working on my account? I don't know. I haven't gotten the business. I don't say that to them. I say, that's a great question. Tell me why that's important to you, or why are you asking that question? Well, you know, in the past, I've worked with people, and there's, you know, 4 different people on my account, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And how did that impact you? So again, when they ask you a question, ask them a question. You don't want to be annoying about it, and you'll see that it's not annoying. It might even sound annoying the way I'm presenting it to you, but it works. The other thing is, very often I will get someone probably on the phone and sometimes in person say, well, how much does it cost? And I'll say, great question. I understand that's important to you. Obviously, I get that, but we're not there yet. I don't have enough information to be able to answer that question, but I promise I will answer that question. Now, if someone, you might also use this as a qualification technique. Someone calls on the office for us. Someone calls on the phone and they want to know how much an office is. Well, that's a great question. We honestly have packages that start as low as $75 a month for open space. And for private offices, you're looking at anywhere from $800 to $1,600 a month. But there's many things that go into the question. Yes, Kelly.
Okay, Pat has a question, but Patrice. She says, a lot of times our company gets into a visit with the prospect to give a network audit and quote for our services. So would I be able to incorporate these questions after that? If so, how do you suggest I go about doing that?
Well, first of all, I would be doing the submarine before the audit. I would be doing now, another thing. I'm going to guess that most people on this webinar do not close in one call. So that means you're going to have to come back. You're going to have an initial phone call. You're going to do some bonding and rapport. Hey, want to spend about 15 minutes on the phone, get a sense of what you're looking for, see if we have something that makes sense, answer your questions, and at the end, we'll decide what's the next logical step. That's what the phone call might look like. And you go into pain. But what I want to say is every time you start again, you start over. So in other words, Patrice, you might be going through the submarine to decide if it's worth your time to do the audit. I don't know how many audits you do that come to nothing, or what your percentage of close is on those audits, but I would want to see you qualify more before you do the audit. Does that make sense?